This is Janus Dispatch, Architecture over Narrative. Today's with part number 7 in the State of the Republic series, America the Strong, and why 5 genuine American advantages ran into 3 choke points that none of them price. On the evening of the 14th of June 2026, hours after the ceasefire with Iran was announced, and on the day the architect turned 80, a technology analyst named Farzad Mesbahi posted on the platform formerly called Twitter that the American empire was just getting started. He is a former Tesla insider who now writes and broadcasts independently to an audience approaching 400,000. The sentence was crafted as a thesis, not a slogan. SpaceX has a stranglehold on space with a 20-year lead. The United States leads in artificial intelligence by models and by chips. Free markets, free speech, 2 oceans, friendly neighbors, the strongest military in the world, a populace with more guns than people. The only way adversaries can win, the argument runs, is by tearing the country apart from within. As long as 4 conditions hold: free speech, the Second Amendment, capitalism and free markets, and an awareness of how awesome America really is, the trajectory is, in the writer's own word, literally impossible to stop. Bottom of the 9th, bases loaded, 3-2 pitch. A single home run wins the rest of the century. That frame is unfamiliar to this series, because the series has been describing a different story for 6 essays. Compound ignorance, obedience in advance, the one-way door, the Festinger Trap, the proof of concept, the mortal God. 6 pieces of work on the same body of evidence, on a republic that has lost the ability to reform itself from within. This is not the first time someone has written a strong American thesis. It is the first time, on the day the Iran war was declared over, that a substantial version of it arrived from a position the series had not yet had to answer. The sentence is not the origin of that position. It is its sharpest available statement, the form the technology and capital reading of American power takes when someone with a real grasp of the supply chain sets it down in one place without hedging for an audience that already holds it. This dispatch answers it because it is the best one, not because it is the only one. The honest answer is that most of what Mesbahi writes about substance is true. The materials he names are real. The problem is not in the substances. It is in the inference from substances to trajectory. So, this dispatch holds the substances and marks where they run out. A companion dispatch tests the inference. Both have one advantage the sentence did not: 8 weeks of record. The war it was written on the last day of was not over. The memorandum that closed it was signed at Versailles on the 17th of June and declared over by its American signatory on the 8th of July, 21 days later. The strait it was written to reopen has been blockaded or contested ever since. Start with the substances because they hold. The first is space. SpaceX has a stranglehold no competitor will close inside 20 years. The Starlink constellation has more satellites than the rest of the planet combined. The reusable orbital architecture has cut the marginal cost of putting a kilogram into orbit by an order of magnitude, and the marginal cost is what determines who runs the next layer of defense, surveillance, and information warfare in low Earth orbit. Russia's space program is a memory. China has progress but no Starlink equivalent. Europe has commitment without scale. India has scale without depth. The American lead here is not a hope but a present condition. The second is artificial intelligence. The leading model laboratories are American. The leading chips are American designed. The leading deployment platforms are American operated. China is catching up at the model layer. It will not catch up at the silicon layer for years, because the silicon depends on a Taiwan fabrication ecosystem the Chinese alternative cannot replicate at present process node and yield. That lead is real, and it compounds month over month as long as the supply chain holds. The third is geography, and it is where substance and condition come apart most cleanly. 2 oceans and 2 land borders no army will cross. That is a line item, and it does not move. The United States is not invadable. The military, at somewhere near $1 trillion a year, produces the carrier capacity, the air dominance, the logistic depth, and the alliance network no rival can match in this generation. What is not a line item is the word friendly. On the 20th of July, the administration invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, a statute with no modern use, to place an additional 50% tariff on certain Canadian goods. That includes goods compliant with the trade agreement this administration negotiated itself. It takes effect on the 19th of August against roughly $20 billion of annual imports. Ottawa has been negotiating across every strategic sector against that deadline since, without agreement. To the south, the Mexican president has refused American military strikes against cartels on Mexican soil in the plainest language available. Sovereignty is not for sale. Mexico continues to cooperate on migration, on seizures, and on extradition. Neither border is a military problem, and neither is likely to become one. Both are now political, and political relationships have to be maintained rather than owned. The fourth substance is demography, on the other side of the chessboard, and it divides the same way. China's population has been shrinking since 2022. The Chinese fertility rate is below the American one. The Chinese workforce will have over the next 40 years if the present curve holds. That half is a curve, and curves are not policy. Nothing done in Washington between now and November moves it. The other half is not a curve. American fertility is also below replacement, and the compensating mechanism has never been births. It has been the importer of last resort function, the country that takes the world's ambitious young and keeps them. Mesbahi does not name that function. His demographic claim is a single clause about China's demographics continuing to collapse, and it is an argument about the other side of the board only. The asymmetry he points at is real. It holds only if the American side of it holds, and the American side has never been births. That side is a policy output, and the policy has changed. An executive order of the 16th of December 2025 established restrictions covering 39 countries, with no exception for student or exchange visitors. The State Department partially suspended issuance in those categories for nationals of 19 countries from the 1st of January. The duration of status regime ended, so a student now files an extension through the Immigration Service, pays a $420 fee, and submits biometrics. A $100,000 fee on skilled worker petitions was announced, enjoined by a federal judge in early June, and is being collected again while the appeal sits with the First Circuit. The Institute of International Education's Spring Snapshot projects foreign enrollment down 9.5% this fall. More than 100,000 students, some $3.5 billion in local spending, near 40,000 jobs. The demographic advantage is real. The mechanism that converts it into an advantage is being run in the other direction. The fifth substance is the one Mesbahi did not list, and it belongs on the list. Since 2025, the United States Treasury and Congress have built the regulatory architecture for private dollar stablecoin issuance to scale outside the correspondent banking system. The Genius Act provided the legal foundation. Tether and Circle issued dollar tokens that, by the middle of this year, held over $250 billion in combined market capitalization and counted hundreds of millions of users in jurisdictions where the central bank had failed its citizens. Argentina, Turkey, Nigeria, Vietnam, parts of Eastern Europe, parts of Africa. The mechanism circumvents the foreign central bank. The user in Buenos Aires does not need the peso, does not need the local bank, and does not need to convert at the local rate. He needs an internet connection and a wallet, and he holds dollars on a chain the United States Treasury has helped legitimize. The political project of de-dollarization, pursued from Beijing and Moscow and Brasilia for 2 decades, is being outrun by a private adoption curve those same governments have no instrument to slow. This is not a forecast. It is a present line item of an order of magnitude the international monetary literature has not yet caught up to. 5 substances, each of them a line item rather than a frame claim. Whatever else is true of the sentence on the birthday, the ground under it is real. Which is where the argument usually stops and where this one starts. Invasion is the failure the geography prevents, and the third substance conceded it without asterisk. It is not the failure the record describes. Hobbes called the sovereign a mortal god. Tainter described the simplification that follows when complexity passes its marginal return threshold. Neither wrote about invasion. Both wrote about how a sovereign that survives every external test can still cease to function from within. The mortal god dispatch named 3 deaths: external shock, the system's own complexity, and demographic starvation. None of the 3 required an army to cross a coastline. None of the 3 is averted by the geography Mesbahi names. The defense of the substances is not the defense of what allowed them to be built in the first place. What allowed them to be built was constitutional government and the institutions that translate it into operating reality. 2 oceans defend the coast and leave the institutions undefended. There is a parallel worth holding. The 5th substance is itself an exercise in projecting American institutions outward. It takes the constitutional foundation that produces the dollar and licenses it, through private intermediaries, into jurisdictions whose own institutions have failed. That projection requires the projecting institutions to hold. A dollar token whose backing depends on a treasury market, whose orderly function depends on institutions in motion, is a chain only as strong as the weakest of those links. The present strength of that link is not in dispute. What sets its load is, and that is a question about institutions rather than about assets. That argument holds on its own terms. It does not hold for the ocean that has been doing the work since June. The memorandum signed at Versailles on the 17th of June committed to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, shut since the 28th of February. It deferred the nuclear question and the strait's operating terms to a 60-day negotiating window. On the 6th and 7th of July, 3 ships were attacked in the strait. On the 8th, the American signatory declared the ceasefire over and notified Congress that limited military action had resumed. Strikes ran across Bandar Abbas and the islands of Kish, Keshem, and Abu Musa. The naval blockade of Iranian ports, first imposed in April, was reinstated. Crude moved more than 9% in a day. On the 12th, the Revolutionary Guard announced it had closed the strait after firing on a vessel attempting transit, and the United States military insisted the strait was open. 21 days after signature, the instrument was dead. What has run since is neither war nor settlement. On the 1st of August, a planned strike was canceled to make room for talks. On the 5th, the reopening was said to be a day or two away, and Brent fell more than 6%, below $79. On the 6th, the Iranian parliament took up a plan to bar American and Israeli shipping from the strait and charge everyone else a toll. On the 10th, the American position added compensation for past misdeeds as a condition of talks. The president described his own posture as semi-negotiating, and the blockade was named as the instrument of choice in place of further strikes. Crude moved 5% on the doubt. This is the 5th substances test, run in public, at a price every reader can look up. The stablecoin architecture, the chip supply chain, the frontier laboratories, and the treasury market they are all denominated against rest on an energy price that a contested waterway sets from outside American jurisdiction. The water that matters here is not water the United States borders. It has been closed or contested since the 28th of February, mined and picketed by the Revolutionary Guard from the day of the opening strikes, the object of an American air campaign from the 19th of March, blockaded from the 13th of April to the 29th of May, open toll-free for some 3 weeks after the memorandum, and never at normal traffic, shut again in the 2nd week of July. 5.5 months, 1 partial reopening, and every week of it priced in public, in a number any reader can set beside the one printed the week before. That is the first choke point. The second sits underneath the substance Mesbahi calls strongest. The models run on chips. The chips run on a fabrication ecosystem this dispatch has already named. The fabrication ecosystem runs on inputs that appear nowhere in the marketing of a frontier laboratory, and without which no fabrication plant operates. Gallium, germanium, the rare earth cluster. They are the polishing compounds, the magnets, the radio frequency components, the optics. China processes roughly 90% of the world's rare earths, 80% of its tungsten, 60% of its antimony. That is not a lead. It is a choke point, and it belongs to the other side. The position was converted into an instrument on the 22nd of June. Beijing placed 10 American firms under new export controls. 2 of the 10 were the 2 largest recipients of American federal investment in rare earth independence, at $550 million and $1.6 billion respectively. The measure was retaliation for American additions to a military blacklist earlier the same month. Its precision is the substance of it. The sanction was aimed not at American consumption, but at the American attempt to stop consuming. Prices in some categories have moved as much as 6-fold, and European licensing approvals have fallen below a quarter of applications. Washington has answered, and the answer is serious. 11 bilateral critical minerals frameworks have been signed. A domestic strategic reserve has been launched through the Export-Import Bank, backed by a $10 billion direct loan and $2 billion in private capital. On the estimates of the people building it, full supply chain independence is 5 to 7 years away. That is past the window in which the artificial intelligence lead is supposed to compound. This series has named the chip supply chain as the place to watch for an interruption and has been watching the Taiwan Strait for it. It should have been watching here as well. The third choke point is the buffer, and it has the shortest clock. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve held about 415 million barrels on the 28th of February, the day the campaign against Iran opened. A release of 172 million barrels followed in March, after Iran moved against shipping in the Strait. In the first week of August, the reserve fell below 300 million barrels for the first time since 1983. 298.7 million. A 43-year low, with a gap to full capacity worth something near $28 billion at $70 oil. The United States is the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. That is a substance, and Mesbahi could have listed it. The buffer that converts the substance into strategic depth has been drawn down by more than a quarter inside 6 months, in a conflict the same administration opened. The Energy Secretary has put the refill at roughly $20 billion and a span of years. That places the restoration of the buffer past the point at which the conflict that emptied it will have been decided one way or the other. 3 choke points, none of them on the list. A waterway the United States does not border and has not been able to open in 5 months. A materials layer the other side processes at 90% and has now aimed at the American attempt to stop depending on it. An emergency buffer spent by more than a quarter in half a year. None of this makes the 5 substances less real, and this dispatch has not argued that it does. It places a boundary around what they cover. Bottom of the 9th, bases loaded, 3-2. The metaphor is accurate about the position and silent about everything else. A batter owns his swing. He does not own the field, the weather, or the decision to keep playing. That is the shape of the 3 choke points. None of them is an argument against the swing. Each is a description of something the swing does not reach, which leaves the question the sentence on the birthday never asks. The 5 substances are real, and each of them was built by something. Whether that something is still in working order is a different inventory, and it is not an inventory of assets. That was Janus Dispatch. Sources, charts, and disclosure are in the published post. If this dispatch sharpened your read, subscribe. Janus Dispatch is at janusthewatcher.substack.com. The long arguments are in the books. The Transition Sequence, 2 volumes, 1 thesis, The Ground is Shifting. Book 1, The Proto-Post-National Age. Book 2, The Frame. Both available on Amazon, paperback, and Kindle. The dispatches connect them. The books carry the weight. Architecture over narrative.